Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Allie's Book Nook. Today I'm going to be talking about the last 4 books I've read since we chatted last. So those books are going to be Someone We Know by Shari LaPena, The Inmate by Frida McFadden on my Kindle, Pretty Little Wife by Darby Kane, and The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey. I think I actually read that before Pretty Little Wife. Okay, so the first book that I have to share with you is Someone We Know by Shari LaPena. I did recently start keeping a little book journal, so I'm going to refer to this because I have a bad memory and it's been a minute since I read this. So, Someone We Know, this is a domestic thriller. I read this in paper format. I couldn't get the audio to work for it for some reason on Libby. I read this from November 16th to November 19th, so it only took me a few days, and it is 334 pages. So, let me read you the synopsis here. So it says, in a quiet, leafy suburb in upstate New York, a teenager has been sneaking into houses and into owners' computers as well, learning their secrets, and maybe sharing some of them too. Who is he, and what might he have uncovered? After 2 anonymous letters are received, whispers start to circulate and the suspicion mounts. And when a woman down the street is found murdered, the tension reaches the breaking point. Who killed her? Who knows more than they're telling? And how far will these very nice people go to protect their own secrets? In this neighborhood, it's not just the husbands and wives who play games. Here, everyone in the family has something to hide. Okay, so my first thoughts on this, first of all, I'll tell you my ratings. For characters, I gave it a 3 out of 5. Plot, 4 out of 5. Writing, 4 out of 5. And overall, 4 out of 5. So my first thoughts were a mom inadvertently discovers that her 16-year-old son is breaking into homes and sending emails from their computers. Why? The prologue, a guy kills a woman with a hammer, and my dog just jumped up here, I'm sorry. A man's wife disappears. And it's kind of an unknown connection. I don't really think that's giving the book away because that was in the first few pages in the prologue. So I'm going to try to keep these spoiler free. So my final impressions, I said that I enjoyed it. It was an easy read, and I do want to read the rest of her books. This was, I think, the 3rd book of hers that I've read, and The Couple Next Door I really liked. The Unwanted Guest was just okay. And then this was probably my 2nd favorite book of hers, behind The Couple Next Door. So would I recommend this? Yes. I said because it's fast-paced, it's a thriller, it will keep you guessing who the killer is for most of the story. So my notes here, again, I don't want to read anything that would give it away in terms of like questions I had throughout the book. I did like the short chapters, which are broken up into even smaller sections, and that makes for a quick read. So that's probably why I got through it in just a few days. This is a suburban drama. And will the kid's antics help solve, or did he send a prank email? What's going on? I did guess the murder, but I was pretty sure it was someone about 85% into the story is when I guessed who I thought it was. I already said this, but I liked this almost as much as A Couple Next Door and much more than An Unwanted Guest. I feel like it had just the right number of characters and suspects. Any more and it probably would have got a little confusing, but I thought that was a good balance there. And one thing that was a little confusing at times was there was alternating use of first names and last names, especially like when the police were involved, they would call subjects by their last names, and so that was a little bit confusing. And like I said, I read this in about 3 days with the paperback copy only. So yeah, I would recommend this if you like her books, if you like thrillers, domestic thrillers, kind of suburban thrillers. It was a nice, quick read. Okay. The next book I read was on my Kindle, and it was The Inmate by Frida McFadden. So here's a picture of it. maybe. Well, it was The Inmate by Frida McFadden. So this is a thriller. It took me 2 days to read this. I read it on ebook and I also listened to the audio. And it was November 21st to November 22nd, 388 pages. My first thoughts were that it was fast-paced and I liked the alternating timelines from 11 years ago to present. The ratings I gave it: for characters, I gave it 3 stars, plot 3.5, writing 3, and overall 3.5. So basically, the synopsis of this book is this lady, her boyfriend attempts to kill her when she's in high school, and then 11 years later she gets a job at the prison where he's incarcerated for murder and attempted murder, and she knows that he's incarcerated there, but she really needs a job as a nurse when she moves back to her hometown, so she gets a job, and somehow they don't, do background checks and stuff. I could maybe see that falling through the cracks, so that was somewhat believable, but some of the stuff in Frida's stories, I don't know, I'm starting to just find them really far-fetched. I like that this book was really fast-paced, quick read. I did enjoy it in the moment, kind of a popcorn read. Not a lot of depth, but just kind of fun and entertaining. But some of the stuff I really question. Okay, so my first thoughts, like I said, it was fast-paced. I like the alternating timelines from 11 years ago to present. My final impressions, I did like how quickly it went in about 2 days, but parts of it felt unrealistic and like a popcorn thriller. So would I recommend this? Maybe. Out of all her books that I've read, The Housemaid would be my first one to recommend. The First Housemaid, I did like that better. I would say this is good for a fluffy thriller, but some parts were pretty unrealistic. These are just some questions I had going through my mind when I was trying to determine what was really going on. Some parts seemed far-fetched. There was one character that I wanted to hear the conclusion of what happened with them. I feel like they were a thread in the story and that was never followed through. And I don't want to say the part that I thought was really unrealistic, but yeah, that was probably my second least favorite Frida McFadden book. And I've read all the Housemaids. I read The Inmate now, and I've read Never Lie. And I don't know. I really want to love Frida. But some of her stuff, I don't know, it was just kind of unrealistic. So I'm starting to not be as into her as I was at one time. But I do still enjoy some Frida McFadden. Okay, so the next book I have is Pretty Little Wife by Darby Kane. And this is a thriller, another thriller. The first 3 books I guess I read were thrillers. I read the paper format here and also listened to it on audio. And this took me about 10 days to read, November 23rd to December 3rd, and it's 402 pages. So this was an interesting premise. That's all I wrote for my first thoughts. Overall ratings: characters 3.5 out of 5, plot 4.5, writing 4, overall 4. So basically the premise of this book is this lady plans on killing her husband, and she thinks that she kills him, but then the body goes missing. And so now she's being accused of, or questioned in his disappearance, and she's just as baffled because as far as she knew, she killed him and left his body to be discovered, and now it's gone. And that information is pretty much all here on the cover. It says, with the small town in an uproar, everyone's worried about the whereabouts of the beloved high school teacher, everyone except his wife. Leela is more confused because she was the last person to see her husband's body, and now it's gone. So I did like this book. My final impressions were that it was good. but I had a bit of a hard time remembering what was going on in between reading sessions. I did like the plot. Would I recommend this? I said yes, because it has a unique storyline and it's easy to read with short chapters. My notes on this: a woman, quote, kills her husband, but his body disappears after. Was he really dead? Was it moved? So he definitely had some character flaws that maybe make you relate to her a little bit more as you get into the story. And I said she did come across as a little bit dry, the wife did. It was easy to read through, short chapters. I did guess part of the ending, but not all of it. It had a bit of a hard time recalling the storyline between readings. It didn't really stick with me. And it was a unique thriller plot. So even though maybe the story wasn't super memorable, all the details and stuff, the plot I thought was a more unique plot, and I did enjoy that. So I would recommend that. That is Pretty Little Wife, and it says on here, there's more than one way to end the marriage. I actually didn't like this on the cover. I thought it was kind of cheesy, and a lot of it I just read without the jacket because I just thought that was kind of a cheesy line to put on there. Okay, the last book I read, and by far my favorite book of the month, is The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey, I think is how you say that name. So this I would call mystical fiction. I read this in paper, just paper only. I read it from 11/24 to 11/25, and it's 391 pages. This was our book club book, and probably my favorite book club book that we've read, and one of my favorite books this year, I would even go so far as to say. So let me read you the premise here. So it takes place in Alaska in 1920, and it says, a brutal place to homestead, and especially tough for recent arrivals Jack and Mabel. Childless, they're drifting apart. He's struggling to maintain the farm. She's crumbling from loneliness and despair. In a moment of levity, during the season's first snowfall, they build a child out of snow. The next morning, the child is gone, but they glimpse a young girl running through the trees. The little girl, who calls herself Faina, seems to be a child of the woods. She hunts with a red fox at her side and somehow survives alone in the Alaskan wilderness. As Jack and Mabel come to understand the child, who could have stepped from the pages of a fairy tale, they begin to love her as their own daughter. But in this beautiful, violent territory, things are rarely as they appear, and what they eventually learn about Faina will transform them all. My kitten's trying to jump up here. So, yeah, this was a really great book. Ratings. 5 out of 5 for characters. Oh, she's trying to attack. This is what she's after. My bookmark. Little dangly bead. 5 out of 5 for characters. Plot was 4.5. Rating 4.5, and overall 4.5. So my first thoughts was that it was graphic, detailed imagery of winter in Alaska's wilderness, and it's lyrical, and the writing in it is lyrical. My final impressions: I love the imagery in the Alaskan wilderness theme, but the end felt rushed, and the end was the only not great part of the book. So I really loved it. Beautifully written details, kind of like an adult fairy tale. And I actually lived in Alaska for a few years myself, and so some of the scenery that they talk about and stuff like that, I could really picture it. But I think even if you didn't, it's very detailed where you can really picture it. And it was a really cool book. It kind of reminded me of Night Circus. If you like Night Circus, or her other book, Starless Sea. This is kind of the same genre, the mystical fiction type book. Also almost like lyrical and poetic, not poetic, but kind of in its writing, just really beautiful. It was not a lot of action. I mean, totally different pace than these thrillers that I was talking about. Slower pace, except for the end. The end felt rushed and also not super clear. It didn't fit with the writing style of the rest of the book. So I don't know if she was like up against a deadline or what, but that was the only part that I didn't love. So This takes place in Wolverine Creek, Alaska, which is on the Cook Inlet. It's south of Anchorage in the 1920s homestead era. And like I said, an older childless couple makes a snow girl out of snow, and it seemingly turns into a real girl. Okay, I guess I can't read some of these. So it is based on an old Russian fairy tale. And one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, was it aggravating or interesting? I don't know. But whenever they would talk or converse with this snow girl, or whenever anyone, she had any kind of conversations with anyone, there was no quotation marks. But when other people would have conversations in the book, there was. And so I think the author was trying to symbolize something there, you know, in terms of, is she real? And even that is kind of open for interpretation still. Did they imagine her? So there are other characters in this book. There's some neighbors that end up being main characters in the book. The author is from the town that I used to live in. She worked at the newspaper there, the Frontiersman, and at least when this book was published in 2012, she was working at the local bookstore, the Fireside Books. But I don't know if that's still true, you know, all these years later, but 12, 13 years later almost. But I thought that was kind of cool, you know, small world. Who knows if I ever ran into her in that bookstore? I don't know. But I would like to read more of her books. I thought it was just very well written. And my pets are all over the place here. I am sorry. So that was by far my favorite book that I read. Was The Snow Child. And I recommend this. It's not for everyone. In our book club, most of us liked it. One lady, she said she doesn't like fantasy, and so she just could not get into it. And that's fair. It's not going to be for everyone. My least favorite was probably The Inmate. Sorry, Frida, but there was just some major plot holes for me. Or big details that were overlooked. So that was probably my least favorite, but none of them were really bad. I mean, I did enjoy The Inmate in the moment. Just like looking back, it was kind of a little far-fetched at times. But yeah, definitely The Snow Child has been one of my favorite books this year. So I'm currently on my 56th book of the year. I set a goal this year to read 50 books when I got back into reading. And I'm now on number 56, and I'm reading Gerald's Game by Stephen King. It's kind of a companion novel to Dolores Claiborne, or supposed to be in the same universe. And that's my favorite Stephen King book, is Dolores Claiborne, but I haven't read him in years, so it's kind of interesting to go back and remember his kind of quirky writing style and some of his quirkiness that comes through in his books. So I've just kind of been reading at a slower pace this month in December. I've only finished a couple of books in December, and Gerald's Game I've been working on for a while now. This is Milo. Want to say hi, Milo? And so yeah, I might do a recap of some of the books I've read this year, but I would say Snow Child is up there for one of my top books. And this is Minnie coming to join us. So let me know if you guys have read any of these books, what your thoughts are on them. In particular, The Snow Child, if you've read it. And what are some of your favorite books that you've read so far this year? I already have a TBR list going for next year, so I'm excited. I'm going to try to increase my goal of 60 books for next year. So as always, I'll keep you guys updated on my progress on all that. And thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.